Hello everyone, I'm Bill and welcome to Bill's Odds and Ends. If this is your first time here, be sure and subscribe and click on that bell icon to be notified of all of my new videos. Also, give this video a thumbs up as it really helps the channel out. And now, on with the video.
Now we got the all clear to go ahead and enter right into the reserve, so I just want to give everyone some quick final reminders to please remain seated with your hands and arms inside the truck at all times. For your safety and the safety of the animals. So hold on to any loose personal belongings tightly because it is going to get bumpy and I am not allowed to stop to pick anything up if it falls out. And also please keep your face coverings on at all times as well, even out here on the reserve, for the safety and comfort of some of the researchers that we might see out here today. Now we've entered the reserve in an area known as the Little Aturi Forest, which is usually a pretty good starting point for our safaris. And it looks like we're off to a good start here today as well, with an okapi over there on our right-hand side. Now the okapi does have some pretty stylish zebra pants on, but they are not related to the zebra. They are actually the only known relative of the giraffe. And we know the okapi and the giraffe are related based on the shapes of their skulls, their long necks, and also actually their tongues. The stripes on their legs, though, are not just for fashion, they are for function too. And that's what helps them camouflage themselves among all the trees down here. In fact, the okapi is so good at hiding that they weren't even discovered by Western explorers until about 1901. And even though they were known to African civilizations many generations before that. Now, watering holes like this one are usually really great areas to do animal spotting as well because they are such important parts of the animals' daily lives. It is looking a little quiet down here right now, though, so we'll keep going a little farther up ahead to see if we can find anyone that may have been here recently. A lot of the animals that live in the forest do like to be here because they can rely on their natural colors and markings as camouflage, which is great for helping to protect them from predators, but can make them a little tricky for us to spot sometimes, too. Now, it is looking a little quiet here still, so we're going to go ahead and start to make our way back out of the forest. Although, as we do, looks like we are getting a pretty good look at some greater kudu up at the top of that hill. There's actually going to be all female greater kudu that we're seeing up there, which we can tell because only the males of that species grow horns. Now, even though we are coming back out of the forest, we're just going to keep making our way out towards the savanna up ahead. And I usually find one of the best ways to do that is by following along the Safi River that runs through the reserve. Not only is the river another great watering hole for the animals, but it is also home to some of the water-dwelling animals, too. So we'll probably need to be on the lookout for things like the Nile hippopotamus, and maybe even some Nile crocodile, too. Now, I will say that hippos do tend to be a little on the trickier side to spot, which might sound a little silly at first, since they weigh around 4,000 to 5,000 pounds. But being that big also makes them too dense to be able to swim. So in the water, they sink all the way down to the bottom, where they can hold their breath for up to 8 minutes at a time. We are getting a pretty good look at that one over there on our left right now, though. Now, the hippos are also nocturnal animals, so they might be starting to come out of the water and be more active and start grazing along the riverbanks here. When they do come out of the water, they have a lot of different noises they can use to communicate with one another. But their most distinctive is actually officially known as a wheeze honk. And each hippo has its own unique wheeze honk. That way they can always tell who's talking. The gray and white birds that are also nesting on this island here are the pink-backed pelican. Pelican are pretty famous for the pouches that they have on their beaks, but those pouches also serve some really important purposes for them. And one of the ones that not as many people may know about is that birds actually don't sweat. So what the pelicans can do instead is wiggle that bottom pouch back and forth, allowing them to help circulate the air around their bodies to cool down instead. As we continue our journey out towards the savannah, we're going to be crossing the river on this bridge, and we're going to be crossing really carefully, because those are the Nile crocodile that I mentioned a moment ago, and they are one of the animals here on the reserve that we definitely do not want to mess with. They're known to be territorial, but they are also known for their jaw strength. In fact, the Nile crocodile can snap their powerful jaws closed, exerting around 2,000 pounds per square inch worth of pressure when they do. That's strong enough that they can snap the bones of their prey when they eat if they needed to. But they can also control that jaw strength surprisingly well. And that's one of the things that also make them pretty great parents. Because when they have eggs that are getting ready to hatch, they'll roll the eggs around in their mouths to help crack the shells. And then once the babies have come out, they can also flip them up into their mouths to protect them until they're big enough to protect themselves. From the top of the hill here, we are getting our first glimpse of the savannah down below. And looking out over its landscape, we can really tell how things here are shaped by the animals that call it home. A lot of the grass is going to be relatively short thanks to antelope and livestock species that graze on it. And most of the trees don't have very many low-hanging leaves either, thanks to giraffe towers that come through and graze on those. Now I am hoping we're going to have some pretty good giraffe spotting out here this evening. They are very active animals, spending around 18 to 20 hours a day grazing. And that might sound pretty nice to us at first, but kind of the trade-off they make with that is that out of the remaining 4 to 6 hours in a day, they really only spend about 30 minutes of their time at rest. And I also don't really know if I would consider it to be resting by our standards either, because out in the wild, giraffes stand 24 hours a day, including when they sleep. And the only time we really ever see them sort of get a chance to sit down is when they're on protected reserves and facilities like this one, and trust us enough to know that we're keeping an eye out and hoping to protect them from any predators that could be nearby. Now, speaking of predators, we may want to keep our eyes peeled because it is looking a little quiet on this part of the savannah right now. That's usually a pretty good sign that some might be nearby. Ooh, especially since there's a den over there on our left. That is usually, a great spot to see them hanging out. And it looks like there's a pair of spotted hyena over there right now. Now, there do tend to be a couple different misconceptions that people have about the hyenas. The first is that they're related to dogs, but they're actually their own entirely separate species known as hyenidae. And if we're going to compare them to a pet at home, they're actually more closely related to cats. A lot of people also tend to think that they are scavengers who only pick off of other animals' leftovers, but they are predators and do their own hunting. What they hunt, though, will depend on if they've got their clans with them or not. When they're hunting solo, they'll go after smaller prey like birds, like that one seems to really want to do right now. And when they've got their clans to support them, that'll be when they go after the larger prey like zebras or wildebeest. Now, the hyenas can also actually pretty much hunt whatever they would like, because they are one of the few animals whose jaws are strong enough that they're able to consume bones when they need to. Now, since we did just see those hyenas, that's probably why it is a little bit quiet here right now. When there are predators in an area, it's common that we'll see a lot of the antelope and hoofstock species that start to come together to help protect and defend one another by doing things like taking turns keeping watch. And they're also so smart and cooperate so well that they all know the sound of one another's distress calls. So no matter who does spot trouble first, everyone knows when they need to get up and start running too. Now, even though these Ankole cattle have these really big horns, their horns are not necessarily used for defense. They're actually used to help regulate their body temperatures. Their veins run all the way up to the tips of those horns, allowing them to circulate the blood around inside to help it cool down, and then they'll circulate it back down to their bodies afterwards. That also means that their horns are not quite as big and heavy as they might look to us at first glance, because they're not made out of a solid material. They're made out of a honeycomb-like structure that allows the veins to get up to the tips there. Although they do still actually weigh about 15 pounds each, which definitely makes them a lot bigger than anything that I'd want to have to wear on my head all day. The Ankole cattle also actually have a different name that they go by sometimes as well. They are sometimes referred to as Watusi cattle, which is a nickname that they have from the tribe that first domesticated them. They're the only domesticated animals that can be found out here on the reserve. And even though they're domesticated, they actually aren't even used for milk or meat of any kind. They're still used as a sign of wealth and a form of currency among some African tribes.
That's the backside of the cattle. All mine's, Lisa.
Looks like we got a straggler up ahead here on our right, too. Now, we are also starting to get towards some of these taller trees, and that's usually a really good area to see the giraffes hanging out. And that's because, at least partly, they can graze out of the trees pretty easily, and that's only partly because of their height, actually. Fully grown and adult giraffe can be anywhere between 16 and even all the way up to 20 feet tall, making them the tallest land animal in the world.
Here we go.
The other thing that actually really helps them out when they graze, though, is going to be their tongues. A giraffe tongue is approximately 20 inches long, and their tongues are also prehensile, which is just kind of a fancy way to say that they can use them a lot like how we use our hands. using their tongues to wrap around the leaves to pull them out of the trees and into their mouths. And we're also coming through a herd of white-bearded wildebeest on our left and right-hand side here. And I do think we've also caught up to the giraffe tower over here on our left as well. Even though they also grow to be one of the tallest animals in the world, even the baby giraffes are going to start out pretty large by our standards. Baby giraffes are actually born at about 6 feet tall and will weigh about 150 pounds at birth. Even though the babies are that big, giraffes also give birth standing up, so the first thing the babies experience is about a 6-foot drop to the ground. And things don't really get a whole lot easier after that either, because they are then expected to learn to stand, walk, and run in about the first hour after they've been born. Oh, that's not really much compared to the wildebeest that we've been seeing out on the savannah today. They actually learn to stand and walk in about the first 15 minutes after birth. Now, the wildebeest also have a really large migration pattern, so being able to stand and walk relatively quickly is really important for them, because during their migration season, they will travel between 500 and 1,000 miles together as well. And in case that wasn't already impressive enough, they'll have about 1.5 million members in their herd during that time. And it looks like we're also coming into elephant country here. We can usually tell when elephants have been on the move through the reserve when we see trees knocked down like we are in this area here. Because elephants don't always have the same height advantage as the giraffes. They actually get to be about maybe 14 feet tall. But what they do have on their side instead is going to be their strength. And they are plenty strong enough to bulldoze the trees down if they need to instead. Now, the elephants do also need to rely on a lot of their resources when they eat, because they actually need to eat around 300 to 500 pounds worth of food in a day and drink around 50 gallons worth of water. Once they can reach what they need, though, they can then also use their trunks a lot like how we use our hands, because elephant trunks are also pretty tensile. Coming around the watering hole here a little bit more, we are getting a great look at some greater flamingo. The greater flamingo are the largest species of flamingo, but also the lightest shade of pink out of any flamingo species as well, which is why they may not look quite as pink as what we usually imagine the flamingos do. When they first hatch, though, they don't hatch pink. They hatch gray with black legs, and they don't start to get their pink coloring until they're closer to about a year old. When they do start to turn pink, it's also not something they do entirely on their own either. All that pink coloring is going to come from all the beta carotene in the algae and the brine shrimp that they'll eat.
The bridge, I think, is coming.
This is a pretty big mud pit in this clearing. Could be another really great sign of elephant activity. Even though the elephant skin might look pretty tough to us, it's actually really sensitive. And as the bulldozers of the savannah, they can't always rely on the shade from the trees to help them protect their skin from the sun. What they could do instead, though, that's really smart, is throw things like dirt, dust, mud, or even the clay on themselves if they needed to. And when they're doing that, they're just using those things as a natural form of sunblock to help better protect their skin from sunburn. With all the animals being here on the reserve, we get a lot of opportunities not just to protect them, but to also study them and learn more about them. And one of the really interesting things our researchers have actually learned about the elephants is that even though they are one of the largest land animals in the world, they are also still kind of afraid of the sound of bees. We've been able to use that information, though, to help farmers who were having trouble with elephant herds destroying their crops. The farmers were then able to build beehive fences, giving them a safe way to help protect their crops from the elephants, and also giving them an additional source of income since they could harvest and sell the honey from inside. It also looks like we've crossed over into predator territory here, and that is a cheetah laying down underneath the trees on our left.
Oh, yeah.
The cheetahs are one of the only big cat species that will be active and do their hunting during the day, and they have a couple of advantages that help with that. There are black markings under their eyes that help absorb and reflect the sunlight as they hunt. They are also the fastest land animal in the world, reaching a top running speed of around 60 miles an hour. They can reach their top speed in about 3 seconds, but it's also more of a sprint for them, so they can really only maintain it for a couple hundred yards or so. And if they don't capture their prey on their first attempt, it takes them so much energy to run at that speed that they are probably going to need to rest up and try again a little later on. Now, just like the cheetahs have advantages to hunting during the day, these lions have advantages to hunting at night. During the daytime, their eyesight is about the same as yours or mine, but at night it's closer to around 6 times more powerful. When they go on their hunts, it is primarily the females who handle the hunting for the pride, and the males will stay behind to defend the territory and any cubs.
Ooh, puppy stretches, or kitty stretches, my bad.
And they can get pretty far away from one another if they needed to, because a lion's roar can be heard from about 5 miles away, giving them one of the most powerful roars out of any of the bigger cat species. Lions are also a species where we can tell the difference between the males and the females pretty easily, since only male lions grow manes. Their manes will continue to grow and get darker as they get older, and they can end up weighing about 40 pounds, which is a lot of hair to have on your head. But it is only a fraction of their actual body weight, since a full-grown male lion is going to weigh pretty close to around 800 pounds on his own. I do see some burrows down here on our left. We'll take a quick peek and see if anyone is home. Well, it's looking pretty quiet down there right now, but I do see some more animals up ahead on our right. Now, the darker brown ones are going to be, it looks like the water buck. Now, the water buck also probably don't really mind being so close to predator territory because they're actually not a very desirable prey animal. They have an oily residue on their coats, which helps make them water resistant, but also gives those coats a very unpleasant taste and texture, so the predators don't really bother them too much. The scimitar horned oryx also probably don't mind being close to predators because, as you can probably tell, they have those long pointed horns, which work as a really great defense mechanism. Now, that white and brown coloring that they have is going to be great camouflage for them when they're out in the desert. And the white parts of their body also actually help them reflect the sunlight while they're out there, which is another really important part of their survival because the oryx already has a hotter body temperature than most other animals, but they also don't even start to sweat until that body temperature reaches around 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The oryx is also actually a really great example of a conservation success story on the reserve. At one point, they had been poached to extinction in the wild and could only be found on reserves and facilities like this one for a really long time after that. But thanks to breeding efforts and conservation programs, the first herd was able to be returned to the wild just within the past couple of years, actually. And we are still continuing to do our best to help protect them and continue to help them rebuild that population. Now, if you're wondering what you can do to help us protect animals, well, one of the best and easiest things that we can do is just going to be to recycle. And even recycling just a single glass bottle will give us enough power that we can power a 100-watt light bulb for around 3 hours. Although if you are looking to make a slightly bigger change, recycling things like our cell phones, laptops, and other electronic devices is going to be really important as well. Because a lot of those electronic device batteries contain a mineral called coltan inside, which is mined in a lot of environments these animals call home, leading to a lot of habitat destruction for them. When we recycle those devices, though, we can help create less of a demand to mine it in the first place. And when we all work together, we can help preserve the animals' beautiful homes for many generations to come. Now, these dates do also mean that we are going to be coming back off the reserve, and I'll be dropping you guys back off to the Warden's Post in Harambe. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the animal activities close around 5 o'clock in the evening, so our last safari has actually already gone out, and a lot of the other animal trails are already closed as well. But the park will be open until 8 o'clock, and you'll still be able to experience the attractions in Dino Land, Asia, and Pandora. So if you haven't done any of those yet, I highly recommend them. And if you went to Pandora earlier in the day, I do recommend actually going back, even if you're not going to ride any of the rides, because they actually have some really cool bioluminescent features. So it's going to look completely different at nighttime than it did earlier in the day. It looks like there's a bit of a traffic jam to get back up to the dock here.
This has been an odd production. Thanks for watching.